People who vanish only to reappear in a different era. Aircraft that disappear into thin air, then return minutes, hours, or even decades later. Places where time itself seems to crack, twist, and swallow the present whole. Come with me into the unknown. This is Project Time Slip. I'm Reverend KJ, and this video is made for the channel IFX. Tonight we dive into some of the most unsettling first-hand accounts ever recorded, some famous, others almost forgotten, but all deeply, disturbingly strange. And along the way we'll explore the theories that suggest time and reality are far less solid than we've been led to believe. Do these stories prove that time slips are real? That's for you to decide. The drive from Scotland into northeast England can feel like crossing into another world. Windswept hills, fog-soaked moorland, and miles of silent forest. Years ago, one family making that lonely journey had an encounter that still haunts them. It was a foul evening, sheets of rain, exhausted parents, hungry children. Then a sign appeared out of the mist food 1 mile next right. Desperate, they followed a narrow lane and arrived at an enormous country house, lights blazing, windows glowing warmly. Yet no cars, no visitors. Inside, a formally dressed waiter greeted them with a stiff, almost startled expression. He spoke little, never smiled, and seated them in an extravagant dining hall chandelier glowing overhead. Silver set perfectly on crisp white cloths. Dozens of tables, but not a single other diner. The food was excellent, but the mother's unease grew. Outside the window, she saw nurses in old-fashioned white uniforms pushing patients onto a terrace in the pouring rain. As soon as their meal ended, the family left quickly. The experience stayed with them, unsettling and out of place. Months later, on a clear day, they retraced the route, determined to find the mysterious house. They found nothing, just collapsed foundations overgrown with weeds. It looked as if it had been abandoned for decades. A ghost story? Maybe. Or did they slip briefly into another time? A world overlapping their own for just long enough to let them in. Time slips don't only haunt remote countryside. Sometimes they happen on roads people know like the back of their hand. A man in Washington County, Pennsylvania, drove the same toll road every morning for over a year. A simple half-hour commute, but one fog-choked morning with visibility near zero, he took the familiar exit after the toll booth and arrived somewhere completely unknown. A silent, empty town, no cars, no pavement, no signs of modern life at all, just dirt streets and buildings that looked a century out of date. Panicked, he turned back to the highway. Taking the next exit returned him to his normal route, but the short detour had somehow added an extra hour to his commute. Days later, in clear weather, he tried to find the strange town again. There was no exit, nothing even close. Time slips often strike in places marked by trauma. Take the story of Caroline Anders, a sensible, level-headed medical worker who moved to Devon, England in the 1980s. On her first drive into the city of Plymouth, she passed a magnificent church, glowing with stained glass. A congregation filled the pews. Weeks later, she drove the same street again. Her heart dropped. The church was a shattered ruined roof gone, walls cracked open to the sky. Her local passenger explained it had been destroyed in World War II. It had been a memorial for decades. Caroline hadn't seen a memory. She insists she saw the church alive. Sometimes slips are even stranger, where minutes for the witness become hours in the real world. A young girl in southwest Germany was helping with the harvest on her grandparents' farm. As she wandered near a forbidden woodland, she spotted a rising haze. Suddenly all sound vanished, the birds, the machinery, even the wind. Then she saw it, a rusted, shattered World War II tank half buried in the forest floor, a ghost of a battlefield long gone. Terrified, she ran back straight into chaos. Her family was frantic. She'd been missing for over 3 hours. They had searched the very woods she had just come from. When she led her grandfather back to the spot, the tank was gone. Children, especially, seem to slip through time more easily. In the 1970s, 2 children staying in a centuries-old Norfolk house woke early and rushed into the parlor only to find a fire already burning and an elderly woman in outdated clothing working a spinning wheel. She looked at them but said nothing. Moments later, when they returned, she and the fire had vanished. The hearth was cold. The adults insisted no one else was in the house. A dream? Or a momentary crack in the timeline? Skeptics dismiss these stories as hallucinations or misremembered events, but again and again the patterns repeat: thick fog or a shimmering haze, sudden silence, a heavy atmosphere, lost time or gained time, locations marked by trauma, strong emotion, or history, and glimpses of people and places long gone, yet impossibly real. Are these psychic echoes, parallel realities brushing against ours, moments when the walls between times grow thin? If so, what causes the crack? And why does it choose certain people? More stories await, more questions, more fractures in reality. You know, the United Kingdom is absolutely saturated with time castles, cottages, and streets layered with centuries of human lives. Some folks believe that in places where reality has piled up in layer upon layer, echoes of the past can become trapped, or even, bleed into the present. But oddly enough, the most active hotspot for time slips isn't some medieval ruin or ancient battlefield. It's actually a modern shopping street in the middle of Liverpool Bold Street. And yes, the same city that gave us the Beatles may also be the epicenter of one of the world's strangest temporal mysteries. So, one of the most famous cases comes from July 1996. An off-duty police officer, let's just call him Frank, was walking toward a bookshop where he planned to meet his wife. It was a completely ordinary afternoon. Then, without any warning at all, the world just shifted. And the busy street around him changed. The cars looked wrong rounded edges. Heavy chrome, unmistakably from the 1950s. The people were dressed in equally vintage clothing, calf-length skirts, brimmed hats, old-fashioned bags. Even the smells seemed different, but the biggest shock was the bookshop. The store where his wife was waiting had vanished, replaced by one called Cripps, selling hats and dresses behind fogged glass. Confused, Frank walked inside. And the moment he crossed the threshold, everything snapped back to normal. His wife standing there, wondering why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Was it a time slip, a hallucination, or, something else entirely? Frank's experience isn't alone, not by a long shot. People have reported all sorts of things: a petty thief accidentally running straight into 1969, a young mother visiting what she thought was a brand new baby shop, only to discover later it had closed Years earlier, and a woman getting a tattoo from a new studio only to watch the ink simply fade away. Days later, when she returned, the shop was abandoned, clearly unused for a long time. Stories stack upon stories, all in the same few blocks. Something is happening on Bold Street, but really, why? One compelling theory points to the Liverpool Underground system, a century-old network powered by high-voltage electricity. The loop of tunnels runs directly beneath the Bold Street area, and intriguingly, time slips reportedly began around the same time the system was electrified. Electromagnetic fields are known to warp perception, disrupt instrumentation, and under extreme conditions even affect the flow of time. Einstein himself speculated that strong electromagnetic forces could bend space-time. Could Bold Street sit atop a perfect storm of electrical currents, geology, and history? A place where the barriers between nows are simply thinner? But the mystery doesn't stop with streets and shops. In the early 1970s, a routine National Airlines flight approaching Miami International Airport suddenly vanished from radar. Controllers feared a crash, search teams were scrambled, and then, 10 minutes later, the plane reappeared exactly where it should have been. When the crew landed, they were confused by the fuss. To them, nothing unusual had happened. No turbulence, no electrical surge, no communication loss. But every clock on board, every wristwatch, every instrument was 10 minutes behind the outside world. Had the aircraft slipped through a small fold in time? A pocket? A bubble? Invisible to the people inside it? Just a few years later, May 8th, 1978, another National Airlines 727 leaving Miami vanished from radar in poor weather. This time, it wasn't lucky. The aircraft crashed due to a chain of miscommunications. Was this purely coincidence? Or were the two events somehow linked echoes of each other across different points in time? This idea may sound far-fetched until you look at the Bermuda Triangle. Electrical storms, sudden disappearances, compasses spinning, time anomalies. One of the most famous but unverified stories involves Santiago Airlines Flight 513, which supposedly vanished in 1954 and reappeared 35 years later, landing with its passengers reduced to skeletons. The story is almost certainly a myth, yet, many believe it was inspired by a real, less dramatic event, a plane that went missing then returned unexpectedly, with its timeline mysteriously out of sync. Is it possible that some aircraft don't vanish but simply slip? If so, could this explain cases like Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a modern mystery that has baffled the world? Could it be caught somewhere in the folds between moments and one day reappear, its passengers believing nothing unusual ever happened? If time truly behaves like a landscape full of tunnels, cliffs, and shortcuts, then perhaps these strange incidents aren't accidents at all. Maybe they're clues that reality is far stranger, far more fragile than any of us imagine. Most time-slip encounters involve people from our world suddenly glimpsing the past as if history briefly wakes and breathes around them. But if time slips are real, shouldn't there also be stories of people glimpsing the future? And more importantly, shouldn't people from the future sometimes appear in our present? Perhaps they do. Perhaps we just call them something else. Across every continent, in every culture, stretching back through recorded history, one phenomenon appears again and again. Shadow people, shaped like figures, living patches of darkness. Something you glimpse from the corner of your eye, gone when you look directly at it. Some describe them as guardians, some as tricksters. Others feel only dread, a sense of being watched by something cold and intelligent. Most encounters are fleeting. Most involve no contact at all. But what if these aren't ghosts, demons, or hallucinations? What if they're humans not dead, but not yet born? Figures from a time that hasn't happened, slipping through cracks into a world that doesn't recognize them, appearing only as shadowy smudges because their bodies don't fully exist in our version of reality. And what if our accidental time travelers look just as strange to people in the past? Maybe the old woman in the Norfolk cottage didn't see two children in modern clothes. Maybe she saw only a flicker of darkness crossing her parlor floor. Maybe she thought it was just a shadow cast by the morning sun. If so, many things we call hauntings might be something far stranger, visitors from a future world, or a future reality, or a future version of us. So, before you dismiss it, take one quick look over your shoulder. Just make sure nothing is standing there watching. There's another story, one with an unexpected witness, that hints at a theory connecting time slips, visions, hauntings, and the very nature of consciousness. It begins in Ravenna, Italy. The Neronian Baptistery, a marvel of early Christian architecture, stands near the mausoleum of Galla Placidia, daughter of the Roman Emperor Theodosius the Great. In the early 1930s, a man visited both sites with a friend. He'd been there before. He knew every chamber, every mosaic. But on this visit, something was different. As they stepped inside, the baptistery seemed filled with a soft blue haze, a strange luminescence that made the air shimmer. And then they saw them, 4 breathtaking mosaics, rich, intricate scenes that neither of them had ever noticed. He was so captivated that he tried to buy photographs afterward, but none existed. Perplexed, he described the mosaics in vivid detail to a friend planning a trip to Ravenna and begged him to find images. When the friend returned, he brought unsettling news. There were no mosaics. Not only that there had never been mosaics matching that description in the baptistery at any time in its history. Both travelers remembered them perfectly. Both described the same impossible scenes. Both swore they had stood before them. The experience shook the man deeply. He would later call it one of the most curious events of his life. And that man was Dr. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, founder of analytical psychology, a man whose theories on the unconscious shaped modern thought. Jung later said that in the nearby mausoleum of Galla Placidia, he felt an almost electric connection to the ancient dead, as if he were seeing through their memories, witnessing what they once witnessed. And that idea led him to one of his most profound theories, a collective unconscious shared by all humans across all eras. So what if time slips are not glimpses of different times at all, but glimpses of memories imprinted so powerfully into a place that they can be relived, re-experienced, or accidentally stepped into? Memories made by people long dead, memories waiting in the dark, memories anyone might stumble into if the conditions are just right, because whatever these events are, they point toward a reality far stranger and sometimes far more frightening than anything we comfortably accept. A reality where time is not a line but a shadowy landscape, and where some travelers may not find their way back. Thank you to all whose accounts have contributed to this chapter. If you have experienced anything like this, if you've seen something you can't explain, share your story in the comments. Check out our other videos for more time slip encounters, and be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get the next chapter the moment it drops. This is Project Time Slip, and we're just getting started.